relics are for. To begin, I might just say, as an American who came to Buddhism later in life, I was not raised as a Buddhist, I share a certain puzzlement about relics that many other Westerners share. Now, of course, people in the West know what relics are, and there are some Christians who also worship their own relics. But when Westerners in the 19th century discovered that Buddhists also worship relics, they were unsure as to why. At first, the early Westerners who sympathized with Buddhism were interested in the ideas of the Dhamma. And they were not very much interested in rituals or relics. And as a consequence, it took a long time for people in the West, for scholars in the West, to understand what makes relics important and why they are significant. Only since around the beginning of this millennium have Western scholars began to take relics seriously. And I'd like to share some of their thoughts about relics before I give you some of my own. Now, scholars, I think, correctly understood that Buddhist relics were crucial for the spread of the Buddhist religion. The building of stupas, dāgavas, the enshrinement of these relics happened all throughout the Buddhist world. The spread of the Buddha Dhamma went hand in hand with the spread of relics. There are some who maintain that the relics of the Buddha helped to make the Buddha present in the world, to be continually worshipped. They stand in for a Buddha who attained Parinibbana. And it has also been said that relics extend the life story of the Buddha. That is to say, it means that the Buddha's story continues to go on. It did not end 2,500 years ago. The Buddha's career continues in other places and in later times, even to this day. So where do relics come from? All Buddhist traditions recount that when the Buddha passed, his body was cremated. There is a story of how his body would not burn until the Venerable Mahakāshyapa came to venerate it. The Buddha was cremated like a Chakravartin king. And this indicates something of how important he was to the people in ancient India. Most Hindu ascetics were not cremated. They were buried or disposed of in nature. But the Buddha was cremated. And upon extinction of the fire, we are told that some of his relics remained. There is a tradition that specifies that sarira, understood either as bones or smaller polished beads or jewels, were left in the fire. Some ancient kings from the kingdom of Malla in Kusinagara first claimed the relics, but they were not the only people who wanted some traces of the Buddha's body. Other kings wanted some to enshrine in their stupas and to venerate them in their lands. His remains were divided into 8 shares and distributed to different kingdoms in northern India. It is said that his relics were enshrined in 8 great stupas around the country. Later, when King Ashoka assumed sovereignty over all of ancient India or Jambudvipa. The relics were gathered together to be redistributed. The physical remains of the Buddha were then enshrined in 84,000 stupas spread across Ashoka's realm. This meant that there was a visible expression of the king's devotion, the extent of his influence, and a tangible sign that the Buddha Sasana would spread throughout Jambudvipa. This helped make King Ashoka famous throughout all time as a Dharma Raja, a king of the Dharma. And he becomes a model for later Buddhist kings throughout the world. But the relics of the Buddha did not stop in India. They were spread even further. Relics were carried by monks to lands outside of Jambudvipa. And of course, as many people here recognize, this includes the island of Sri Lanka. There are a lot of relics that have been brought to Sri Lanka. Just to name a few, there is the right collarbone relic in the Tuparama Dagaba in Anuradhapura. In the great Mahatupa, or Ruanvelisaya in Anuradhapura, it was said that 1/8 of the Buddha's remains were enshrined. The tooth relic was enshrined in a casket and is now kept in Kandy. In Mahayangana, hair relics and the neck bone relic of the Buddha were enshrined. In Seruvavila, a forehead bone relic of the Buddha was enshrined. And there are other relics associated with the Buddha, relics of things, objects that he used. Most notably, the Venerable Mahabodhi tree in Anuradhapura is a relic. On top of the mountain of Sri Pada, there is a footprint relic of the Buddha. And the list goes on and on. There are even relics of arhats in Sri Lanka. I'm thinking notably of the tooth relic of the Venerable Mahakashyapa in Galapata Vihara in Bentota. Relics were also spread throughout the Buddhist world, further than Sri Lanka, further away, places in ancient Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Japan. Every place that the Buddha Sasana was spread, relics were brought. But this raises a question of what are all these relics and stupas for? We do know that the relics that have survived, and some have not, but those that have survived serve the purpose of spreading the Buddha Sasana. They play a critical role in the development of the Buddha's religion. Relics and their shrines are important centers for devotion to the Buddha. And they are primary places for making offerings and earning merit, punya. The tradition has long held that to venerate the relics is to venerate the Buddha, that the Buddha is somehow present in his remains. Although the Buddha is no longer living in this world, his relics still remain. And to honor them is a form of punyakama, a form of earning merit. Merit, as we all know, brings good health, it brings good fortune, it brings good rebirth, and it helps all beings closer to the ultimate goal of nirvana. Relics allow us to remember the Buddha, his acts, his deeds, his great qualities, and to meditate on what he has achieved. Relics attract communities of Buddhists. This happened in ancient Sri Lanka, where pilgrims traveled from all throughout Asia to honor relics enshrined in stupas. The same thing is true for other important stupas, ancient stupas throughout Asia. And in fact, we see the same thing happening today in St. Louis, where a number of people from different cultures, from close by, have gathered to honor the Buddha. One of the important things I think of that is not talked about as much is how relics help to develop morality. It helps with our own ethical development. Relics represent important moral virtues. And I would argue this case because of the traditions associated with relics. Ancient Pali texts describe how the Buddha, when nearing his death, made several resolutions. The term is adhisthana, to spread his relics. These included a resolution to make his relics spread far so that people could worship. The tradition holds that Buddhas and other enlightened beings have the ability to determine what will happen to their relics after death. Many of these